Hi, I'm Rob Dixon. I'm also known as Radix, and my artist name. I'm a code-based generative artist and game developer. Released a few collections on Art Blocks, including Art Blocks curated in spirals and the Eccentric series. I always enjoyed doing artwork, even as a kid, but I was on that career path where the parents had said, no, that's not a career. So went into software development and engineering. But then in the late 90s, I started going into game development, where it was very art focused, and then took a job at Adobe on the Adobe Flash team. So at that point, I was able to just create art and animations and things as part of that team to test things out, and really got into it and just started doing it for fun at the time. There really wasn't a market for any of that at the time. So went with that and stuck with it, but over the years kind of just kept into the game development world until 2020 when I learned about art blocks, and then all of that changed. Coming in as, when I learned about art blocks, it was like a light bulb went off, because I started seeing people doing things similar to what I had done in the past without ever thinking anyone would see it or anyone would enjoy it. And here were people enjoying it and even paying for it, which was amazing. So I just immediately kind of dropped everything I was doing and spent all my spare time on coming up with some generative art pieces. Contacted Art Blocks and worked with them for a couple months until finally they agreed to do the In Spirals drop as a curated drop. And that really led me into long-form generative art, which is its own thing and has all of its own interesting bits and variations and things like that, and changed my practice a lot from that point forward. When I'm creating work, I'm usually starting with a concept of some kind, something that I want to convey. And it could be as simple as, I just really want something bright and animated that's going to make people feel happy when they see it. But it could be something deeper. In my more recent series, I'm really trying to have things with more impact. So I start with that, and then I try to figure out the right tool set. Now, given that software is my tool of choice, there's a lot of different options there. So there's some things like P5.js that are all 2D focused. Others like 3.js and Babylon.js that are 3D focused. My current process has evolved, so I have all those tools at my disposal. So I can start a project with a 3D concept and then render it in a lot of different ways, look at it from different angles, and try to create the most interesting compositions and the most interesting rendering possible at the end. Yeah, in code-based generative art, there really is this process of refinement, consistent, constant refinement. So you start with something that's starting to look really good, it's starting to come together, and you tweak a little thing, you run 10 more, 100 more, see how those are turning out. So by the end of a series, by the end of working on a series, I probably have thousands of test outputs, and each one has been, this is a keeper and I'm going to keep this feature in, or this didn't quite work out, let's tweak it, or let's do that. I'll often start with, I think in my latest series that's coming up, I have about 200 different color palettes that are possible in it. But by the end of going through all the refinement, it's cut in half and there's only 100 that will show up. But it's a long process of seeing dozens and dozens of each one of those color palettes and what did it make me feel, or what did it make somebody else looking at it feel, before it actually gets embedded in the new series. These days when I'm starting, I really do try to start from concept. So what is it that I'd like to convey in this work? In the earlier days, I would just kind of monkey around with stuff and see, oh, this looks cool. Can I make something cool? Could I do an Escher style repeating pattern on a plane, that kind of thing. These days, I'm really focused more on what's the composition going to be, and is that going to be interesting, just the composition itself? Then can I add colors? Do I want it to be somber? Do I want it to be bright? Or a lot of times for code-based generative art series, you want that mix. So you want some that come out like film noir, black and white, and others that come out bright and airy and fun. So there's a lot of variety in them, but it's all coming from the initial concept of, here's what I'm trying to say with this series. I do have an upcoming collection. It's called Exposures. It's really trying to push the envelope a little bit in what I can do in terms of having art with an impact that's code-based, on-chain generative. So I've taken 3D figures that are animated and posable and embedded them into data in the works. So there are figures placed throughout the works in different poses, and I really want the works to tell a story. So you see two people in very different poses. One's on their phone, completely distracted, while the other's dancing around. And you kind of look at that and say, what's going on? What are these people? What are they doing? And I think that's something I haven't been able to do before in my generative artworks that have mostly been abstracts. So I'm trying to tell a story with these figures, but also with the composition in general, with the colors that are in use, figures navigating these really bright, vivid kind of digital landscapes, but kind of lost in them at the same time, and making a statement there about what we're doing when we're all on our phones all day, living in these digital worlds. What's that doing to us? And can I convey some of that, like the good and the bad of it? Because it's opening all these new worlds to us, but at the same time, it's making us really distracted and missing sometimes the real stuff that's going on around us. Algorithmic art going forward is going to have an interesting path. I think there's going to be a couple ways that it evolves. One, and again, what I'm trying to do in my new series is create art that people don't have to understand how it was made at all. And that's a big change for code-based generative art, because very often series are about the technology itself. They're about how it was built and how does it look in a series to show all the variations and things. So I think we're going to get to a point where it does just become more invisible how it was created, and the artwork stands alone in some way or another. With AI coming in, it adds a whole new angle to things. So that's also, mostly for the art, but I think as long as we can make that just a tool in the tool set and use it, I really love what some artists are doing, taking their past works and putting it through their own kind of AI process. So I think it's getting there, and I think it will become another tool for us. So I'm optimistic in general over where we're going and where this kind of digital art world is going to go and cross over into the mainstream art world, really. Visiting Marfa is super interesting, especially as an artist. So for so many of us generative artists, especially those of us who've been doing this for 20 years, Art Blocks was just such a game changer. It really opened up code-based artwork for everybody that hadn't seen it before. So we really owe a lot to Art Blocks, and at the same time, the community that's formed around all of this has just been amazing. There was the boom and bust, of course, of the marketplace stuff, but in the end, the crew has been really, the collectors and the artists and everybody behind it have been really supportive, and they're all still here and ready for what's next. So I think it's a great time to be part of this. You can find me on X as @RobDixon, or you can find me on Instagram as @RDIX, and my website is radixart.io.